test, try to have that number correct.
You say all that.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, the only number we're just quick review of last week's class, Numbers chapter 1, verse 46. That's the one number in chapter 1 I want you to hang on to. That is, of course, how many men were of fighting age, ready to go to war, but it is also the number which we can reasonably assume how many Jews out there in the wilderness total. I would say 2.5 to 3 million people. Figure these fighting men are married, got some children, there's foreigners with them. You can extrapolate the numbers to get fairly close. 2.5 to 3 million people. So got to get organized out here in the wilderness. So they do a census, of course. That's where the title numbers comes from. We looked at the individual tribes in chapter 1 last week. I'm not interested in if you know the exact number of all the tribes, but we did want to notice, most importantly, 2.5 to 3 million people. We are moving. Chapter 33 gives you the Reader's Digest version of how many times they moved in the wilderness. You camped around a tabernacle, a portable structure that has to be picked up and moved. So you better be organized. And God is very organized. We compared it to Genesis chapter 1 last week. One of the things you learn when you read Genesis 1, systematic and organized. God is very systematic and organized. And so we should be too. When it comes to the way we think, when it comes to the way we attack tasks, that becomes very important. Anybody ever work with a master craftsman? First job I had when I moved to Florida, I was helping a guy lay ceramic tile, but he was a master craftsman. I love that passage in Ecclesiastes. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but like the words of the preacher, like words of the wise are like one well-driven nail. Anybody know what passage I'm talking about? It's in 11 or 12. Daniel's teaching that right now. Quick, call him and see what he says. Anyways, it's in 11 or 12, but the point is, you actually watch a master craftsman work. It can be an inspiring thing to behold. What they say, measure twice, cut once. He would be offended at that. If you got to measure twice, there's something wrong with you. You measure once, it's right, you cut it, it goes in. And I mean, this guy we did $1 million homes, but just watching a guy like that. And of course, Solomon is comparing that to somebody who's good with words as well, but the same kind of thing, that God is systematic, organized, and we should be too. Knowing how the task has to be performed, doing one step at a time, being fully engaged as you do it. It's one of the interesting things about how God would have us operate. I like what C.S. Lewis said one time. Satan is wanting you constantly worried about what's going to happen to you. God wants you focused on what you're doing. Satan will always have you worried about the future. God's already got the future covered. What are you doing right now? You're doing the right thing right now, and if we can be fully engaged like that, systematic, organized becomes a whole lot easier. God is systematic. He's organized. Here's the tribes on the east, chapter 2. There's the tribes on the south. Right in the middle is the tabernacle, verse 17. Here are the tribes on the west. Here are the tribes on the north. I don't think on the test I'm going to ask you, hey, describe the tribes around the tabernacle. I can't really see that I need you to do that, other than I want you to notice just how systematic and organized it is. When they blew the trumpets, which we will see here in chapter 10, they knew how to move. Tribes on the east moved first. Tribes on the north came in behind them, and then came in the middle was the tabernacle. And then the tribes on the west, and finally the tribes on the north. Chapter 3, test question, or wait, that was on the last test, so I guess we won't ask it again. Who are Aaron's surviving sons? Eleazar and Ithamar. What happened to his other two sons?
offered strange fire.
In the middle of worship, God killed them. We and take you along in the Church of Christ, be introduced to Leviticus chapter 10, and if you stick around long enough, you'll understand why you're going to keep hearing that. Although I do have one thought about that, but a little bit later on maybe. But anyways, got to have God's authority. That strange fire which God did not command them. Silence of the Scripture. Very important. Why do we not use musical instruments in our worship? We read the New Testament carefully and we see what they were doing in worship. We see an absence of musical instruments. We see a cappella singing, psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, one to another, teaching and admonishing one another in those psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Singing and making melody where? In your heart. So that's why we do it. The man that converted me had a way of making complex things very simple. I love the way he said it, never forgot. He said, Mike, the apostles were guided into all truth by the Holy Spirit. And we just do what they did when it comes to worship. Aren't we on safe ground? And I haven't found a reason to disregard that yet. Sounds like pretty good logic to me. So anyways, Leviticus, Nadab and Abihu become very important for that reason. We won't revisit the story, but that's Leviticus chapter 10. But anyway, it gives us census of the Levites, the ministry of the Levites in chapter 3. Who are the three sons of Levi? That would be Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. What special task is Kohath given? That's who carries the furniture of the tabernacle. They were given a very special assignment. They were literally carrying the Ark of the Covenant from camp to camp. But it was the Kohathites. For those of you who weren't here last week, a small crowd. I know we had some pretty good crowd online, but we had a small crowd in person. Chapter 3, we see that the duties of Merari, Gershon, and Kohath are laid out over verse 6 of chapter 3. God sets the pattern for how they do it. Well, actually, no, he's taking the census. I'm sorry, a little confused there. Taking the census. Look at verse 17 of chapter 3. When I said, who are the sons of Levi? There you go. Gershon, Kohath, Merari. Which son was tasked with moving the furniture, the literal furniture? It's Kohath. And then there's the census of Gershon, comes right after that. I'm not going to worry about the numbers. There's the census of Kohath right after that. I'm not going to worry about the numbers. And then there's the census of Merari, which starts in verse 33, And the one thing, actually, I will read the census for one reason. I just don't have the answer for you. Look at verse 28, chapter 3, verse 28. According to the number of all the males from a month old and above, there were 8,600 keeping charge of the sanctuary. No, wait a minute, that's not the one. We'll get back to it. But anyways, those are the numbers for the three sons of Levi, Kohath being the most important one for that reason. Gets into the ministry of Kohath in chapter 4. And of course, he comes first because he's carrying the. And so, obviously, if you're carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the altar of burnt offerings, the table of showbread, and the lampstand, you better be serious. We're not calling two men in a truck here. We're moving precious cargo. They had to do it right. They had to cover it right. They never touched it, by the way. Thank you. I thought that was funny. No one's laughing. I hate it when I tell a really good joke and I'm the only one that thinks for some reason. It's a really good joke. I am a stand-up comedian over here working hard for you. But anyways, Those are that's the census of those three sons and what they would carry. Gershon carried the curtains and all of the outer things that covered it. Sounds like it would have been a lot lighter than what Merari had to move. He moved all the boards and the sockets and all the heavy things. They were considered the carpenters, if you will, because they're working with all the, even though it's a tent, still it's a sturdy tent. And it's got to be put together with a lot of care. And so that's what they cover. Of the two sons of Aaron, that are still remaining, Eleazar and Ithamar. Ithamar's job, he's the foreman. He oversees what Merari's doing. He oversees what Gershon is doing. Eleazar only oversees what Kohath is doing. So the sons of Aaron are tasked with making sure that this is right. Something goes wrong, who does Aaron turn to? Turns to his two sons. What happened? So they are responsible for it. Eleazar and Ithamar, anybody remember which one is going to be the high priest when Aaron is gathered to his people?
Eleazar.
Thank you. Is that Vern?
Carl.
Hey, Carl. You're not here tonight. Well, anyways, absolutely. Anyways, thank you for that answer. Yes, Eleazar will take over. In the meantime, his job is to oversee the furniture of the tabernacle as it is being moved. Chapter 5 gets into the separation of unclean persons. Chapter 5 also, beginning in verse 5, has that bizarre story about the spirit of jealousy. What happened? Anybody remember that story? Talked about it last week. Man has a wife, and the spirit of jealousy comes over him. He thinks she's not been faithful. There's a test. She has to drink the bitter water. The curse is written down, scraped into the dust, and it's put in this water that she has to drink, testifying that she is innocent. And of course, if she is not innocent, what happens to her? Belly swells and her thigh rots. And of course, that story gets our attention. And one of the things that naturally occur to you is, you got any examples of that happening? And the answer is no. But the process did supposedly exist up until shortly before the destruction of Babylon the destruction of Jerusalem by Babylon in 586 BC. But can you imagine why we don't have many examples of this? And I think the answer is because the only women that submitted to this were probably innocent. And I'm just being realistic here. If you knew you were guilty, you would probably confess before you would submit to this, knowing what beholds you if you continue in this lie. But anyways, obviously sexual fidelity is the foundation of a good marriage, the one reason that God gives us, even though the Old Testament, we'll get more into it in the book of Deuteronomy, even though the times of ignorance, God winked at. I think there's 2 New Testament passages when it comes to marriage in the Old Testament that we need to remember. Times of ignorance, God winked at. God looked at Israel the way we look at a developing child. There are some things in childhood that you recognize. The time's going to come when we have to teach you better than that, so to speak. But anyways, God looked at Israel like a developing child. And by the way, I think, as long as I'm thinking of it, how do you answer the person that says, now this is a rabbit, so how do you answer a person that says, well, relatively speaking, Christianity is the new religion on the block. Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism are all older than Christianity. How do you answer that question? Tell you how I answer it. You can't look at Christianity without Judaism. They're connected. Judaism is the girl that grows up to be the bride of Christ. They're not separated. The first passage in the book of the Christian Bible is not Matthew 1:1. It's Genesis 1:1. They're connected. Why do we take time out of our schedule on Tuesday night to study the book of Numbers? Because we learn from the book of Numbers. It may not be binding on us, but that does not mean that we don't. So there's that passage, and then Matthew 19, I think another important passage when Jesus said, yes, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, allowed you to divorce. But from the beginning, it was not so. And by the way, I love that how brilliant Jesus is there. But Moses said, and of course they're quoting Deuteronomy or referring to Deuteronomy 25. There's a 24. Jesus said, have you not read that he who made them in the beginning? And he quotes Genesis 2. Who wrote Genesis? They're trying to pit Jesus against Moses. What's the first thing Jesus does? He pits Moses against Moses. You're not arguing with me. You're arguing with Moses. But then he shows us how they fit together, that because of the hardness of your heart, God did allow divorce. And by the way, there's another question as long as I opened it up. And this one is a question that can be challenging if you're not ready for it. Well, considering what the New Testament teaches about divorce and remarriage, how do you explain Jacob, David, Solomon? God continued to bless them. You know my answers? The hardness of your heart, but also, again, God is revealing his will through the process of time, maturing people to, the full light of the gospel. Anybody ever read the life of Jacob? We're not studying that here. Genesis, Jacob and Leah, Jacob and Rachel. Anybody remember what the name of the first four kids were? My husband will love me. They were by Leah, first four children, because Jacob loved Rachel. The names of the children, without looking them up, I can't think of them off the top of my head exactly what they mean, but the names are all referring to the fact that Leah felt unloved. And the only hope she had was she was being fruitful and multiplying. Sarah's. Well, where's the next baby come from after the first four produced by Leah?
Rachel's handmaid.
Rachel gives her a handmaiden. How's Leah respond to that? Well, here, have my handmaiden. And of course, the point being, does the term walking on eggshells mean anything, neighbor? Through Jacob? Does that sound like a peaceful household to you? Solomon, 700 wives, 300 concubines. How many times do you say in the book of Proverbs? Like better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than in a house with a contentious woman? I think God is teaching us that you don't want to go down that road. One man, one woman. That was always God's plan from the beginning. And unfortunately, as blessed as Jacob, David, and Solomon were, their lives and their multiple marriages are about as good a testimony as you can have as to why you don't want to do that. Not why you would want to do it. So anyways, again, we'll look at that a little bit deeper. But Numbers certainly introduces what we all know, which is in a marriage where there is no trust. That's a miserable place to be. Miserable place to be. I'm staying in a hotel in a strange town once a week. Woohoo! I thought it was going to be funner than it is. TV's not working at my hotel. I'm going to have to read tonight, by the way. But anyways, that's a bizarre story. Gets our attention. But of course, the serious point behind it is that the spirit of distrust in a marriage has got to be dealt with. You just can't live that way. Cannot happen. The sanctification of the Nazirite vow was chapter 6, where we left off. What were the things a Nazirite was not allowed to do? What were his obligations, if you will? Or hers, by the way. What was the second one? Mm-hmm. Dead bodies, not even your own parents. Couldn't touch a dead body. Who were the three Nazarites, for life that we know of?
Samson, John the Baptist.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carl. You only get door number 2. I thought you were going to get door number 3.
Drew a blank.
I forget what he said now. I was too busy working on my comedy routine.
Samson and John.
Samuel, wasn't
Yes, that's it.
it? Not that I'm going to test you on that, but anyways, the Nazarite vow doesn't necessarily mean a life sentence. You took a vow, and those were the obligations while you were under the vow. What happened if somehow you became defiled? You'd start over again. Go down and shave and start over again. And there was a process if you ended it, and that was one of the things we noticed about the Apostle Paul last week. One of the philosophical questions, maybe not philosophical, but differences of opinion that good scholars on both sides of the issue wonder about in Acts chapter 21. The Apostle Paul came up to Jerusalem to deliver the contribution to the poor saints. While he was there, the Jewish Christians, thinking that he hated the law of Moses now, because that's the report he's been hearing, or, that was a message to easily pervert. Paul, noticing that the Old Testament had been nailed to the cross, could be easily perverted into Paul hates Judaism, hates all things Jew, he's a betrayer. So they ask him, hey, there's some guys that have taken a Nazarite vow, it's time to end it. Will you go up and help or assist with them? And Paul participates in it. And the question is that sin or not? Some scholars say it is. Some scholars say it is not. I say it is not. And my biggest reason is because if you read the text we did last week, which is a reason I'm not going to read it again tonight, but if you read the text, there's not a hint that Paul thinks he's doing anything wrong. He gets to chapter 24 when he's defending himself. He refers to that incident. And again, not a hint that he thinks he's done anything wrong. And if the church thought he was doing something wrong, you would think they would have challenged him. But the book of Acts is totally silent on why Paul, or how heaven felt about Paul participating in that. So Paul didn't seem to think he did anything wrong when he went up with those men to end their Nazarite vow, and I don't think he did either. I think that's one of those things where, and by the way, I'm leading to a philosophical question I do want to talk about real briefly. I think that's what Paul meant in 1 Corinthians 9. I'm trying to be all things to all people. But if that's true, and I think it is, then the way Paul, I can only imagine, could have reasoned is, are they making a sin offering even though they are? But it's useless. And I think that what Paul knows is, I think he's looking at them like, I wish I could clear this up for you, but old high deists die hard. And by the way, be careful. Jews are carrying around a 1,500-year tradition. And to just be told, boom, he got nailed to the cross. Okay, you can all go home now. Well, actually, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. But that would be hard. And for a lot of Jews, it was hard. And by the way, sometimes when we know we're right, it's so easy to get mad at somebody that doesn't see it our way. Man, how are you missing the point? It's a wonderful thing if you can just deliver your message to somebody and walk away. And just let them think about it for a while. Let them, roast on it, or however you want to say it, but give them some time to meditate on it. Sometimes you can you can make it worse if you don't. But anyways, here's what I was leading to with Paul. Just happened to me this Sunday. Older gentleman, showed up with a woman. Pretty obvious he's intent on being serious with her. Seemed like a wonderful woman, was paying rapt attention to the lesson on Sunday morning. And she obviously had a biblical background. Well, he tells me on the way out the door that they'd made a deal. She would come to his church and he would go to her church. Yeah, well, he didn't ask me what my opinion of it was. That's what he told me as he was headed out the door. But anyways, trying to be all things to all people. And that's where the connection is. But anyways, there's that dilemma for some people. You know, what would you do in an instance like that? Dave, you want to weigh in on that one?
For me, the scriptural concern is you're trying to appease someone in the sense that, okay, I'll try yours, you try mine, versus focusing on what Scripture says is approved by God. And regardless of what someone else might want to do or feel, ultimately the emphasis is what does God want, not what I want, or what is my friend want. So I have always concerned when people say, well, visit me, just try it. That's what.
Yeah, it's a minefield. And I think it depends on who it is that we're talking about. I think there are some solid people that are trying to do the right thing, and their idea is, I experience what you experience what I experience. Only, yeah, well, let me just finish that. Only if it's leading somewhere. Are you just going to walk out and say, oh, well, that was interesting, and it's not a discussion? The only thing that would make it worthwhile is if you were trying to use the moment to teach.
It's not about our experience, it's about what does the Bible say. And am I going to stick to that before the feelings, you know, what I desire, what I want. So that's where I struggle.
Katrina?
I think it depends on when it is too. Like I wouldn't miss assembly with the saints to go elsewhere. But I can imagine at our time of assembly being somewhere else, you know, that it shouldn't be. You know, I think it depends on when it is too. Like if I would have to miss services at the congregation that I'm associated with, that I identify with, it's out of the question.
Which I think is the way that it should be handled, which is, I'm busy at that time. Thank you for the offer, but why don't we sit down and let the Bible settle this? And I think that's unfortunately sometimes we don't do that quick enough. Let the Bible settle.
I think by thinking we're doing right to the person by appeasing and showing, look, I'll be flexible if you're flexible. We'll see what works, kind of thing. But the hopes that it all lines up right. And that flexibility is very, very dangerous and not God approved. So I don't have a problem worshiping elsewhere. I have a problem if that worship is not according to Scripture. So if I attend with someone else, even if I'm not missing my services, if I attend with someone else, what message am I sending to that person? That there is some degree of flexibility. Well, we'll check it out. Versus not. I know what you got to do there. That's not what Scripture says. It's a principle. Anyway, it's hard. It's hard.
You pointed out when you spoke in our summer series last year, if you had that one last sermon, it would be people elevating the second law of the first. And I would think that's, you know, like this could fall into that. Like if for appeasement of a person, you're going to be flexible, you're elevating them over God, right? Loving God with your all.
It's another thing that I think we get caught up in sometimes. When Peter said, or when Peter finished the first sermon in the book of Acts, chapter 2, let all the house of Israel know that this Jesus, whom you crucified, God has made both Lord and Christ. What was their reaction? Cut to the heart. What does that mean? The full weight of their sin just finally hit them. God sent his son in the flesh, We killed them. What in the world can we do about that? They're convicted. And my point is, being convicted doesn't feel good. Being inspired feels good. Being encouraged feels good. First gospel sermon, convicted them. There's a lot of ways to motivate people, and we tend to get into, if you're not smiling and doing this with everything I say, that somehow what I'm saying is useless. Or I'm maybe not useless, but I'm pushing you away. That's not true. Sometimes the hardest pill to swallow, ouch, man, that hurt. But it's true. And unfortunately, we live in a world that if you don't like the way the message is delivered, then we'll just disregard the message. Some of my favorite preachers, I hated them. And I mean hated them in the sense that it's not the way I would have said that. I wouldn't have said it that way either. I wouldn't have said it that way either. Come to think of it, he said everything he said was true. He didn't say anything wrong. And I had to do that, by the way, one time. I had a gentleman that thought he wanted to be a preacher. He wasn't a member of the Lord's church, but I met him in Sarasota and told him about the school I graduated from. Oh, he was all gung-ho. I want to see it. So I said, I can take you any afternoon of the week except Wednesday. And inside I'm thinking, please don't say Friday. Please don't say Friday. Please don't say Friday. He said Friday. And the reason is because that was the last person I wanted to introduce him to. So we went over, and unfortunately on the way home, the Friday afternoon teacher had the exact effect on him that I was hoping it wouldn't have. What do you say was wrong? What do you say you didn't like? Was it true? Sometimes it can be difficult defending. Yeah. I'm not sure I would have said it that way either. Not sure I would have said it that way either, but it's true. As we have to be able to get over that. Is that me? Is that my own echo?
Not somebody listening.
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought I was getting a feedback or something. That bill will work through that. You have to be able to work through a lesson that's all over your feet, even though the preacher doesn't know who you are. You've got to be able to work through that. There'll be big boys and big girls in life, and that's part of putting away childish things. Some people are so sick that you can tell them exactly what they need to hear to be saved, but if they don't like the way you said it, they don't hear any of it. And we spend our lifetime thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? When in reality, yeah, you might be able to polish message a little bit, but the essential message of what you said was true. And honest souls are going to have to hear it. I didn't always like everything I heard or the way it was expressed, but if it was true, you need to embrace it. Anyways, the Nazirite vow. I'm not going to ask anything about the Apostle Paul and what we just talked about, but what was required of him? No fruit of the vine. You could add vinegar to that, but I'll just stick with the fruit of the vine, which includes grapes or raisins. Nothing. You can't touch a dead body, including your own parents. And don't cut your hair the whole time that you are offering up the vow. So that's about where we stopped last week. In chapter 7, Israel is required to give donations. Read verses 1 and 2, get started here. Now it came to pass when Moses had finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed it, sanctified it, all its furnishings and the altar, and its utensils, he anointed and sanctified them. And of course, we've already read the process, sprinkled oil, blood on all the furniture. Then the leaders of Israel, the heads of their fathers' houses, all who were the leaders of the tribes over those who were numbered, made an offering. And they brought their offering before the Lord, 6 covered carts, 12 oxen, cart for every 2 of the leaders, and for each one an ox, and they presented them before the tabernacle. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, accept those from them, that they may be used in doing the work of the tabernacle of meeting, and you shall give them to the Levites, to every man according to his service. So Moses took the carts and the oxen, gave them to the Levites, 2 carts, 4 oxen. He gave to the sons of Gershon, according to their service, 4 carts, 8 oxen. He gave to the sons of Merari, according to their service, under the hand of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. He's overseeing them. Verse 9, but to the sons of Kohath he gave none, because theirs was the service of the holy things, which they carried on their shoulders. Why did David and Uzzah get in trouble in 2 Samuel 6, I believe, and then 1 Chronicles 13? Put it on a cart. When Uzzah reached out to keep it from falling, he was struck dead. Chapter 15 says it happened because we did not consult God about the proper order. What is one of the things in Deuteronomy? This will be on your test, but not until we get to Deuteronomy. One of the things the king was required to do when he became king? Write a copy of the law and read it all the days of your life. What does that tell us? There should be nobody more scripturally grounded in the law of Moses than your king. The king ought to know what the law of Moses says. Righteous as David was, did not consult the law of Moses. Think passages like this when it came to transporting the Ark of the Covenant. Uzzah paid for it with his life. David recognized that he was wrong. And by the way, that passage is great. We talked about last week, for those of you who weren't here. Is sincerity enough? I got some friends, I can't get cut through that one. Best friend growing up in high school. Loyal as the day is long. When I preached in Plant City, he just happened to move close to me. But when I say close, he's like 30 miles away. He's born and raised in Catholicism. But he would drive that 30 miles every Sunday to hear me preach. Where do you think he went to service after I left? He went right back. Came into service one day, and the elder comes up to him, first time he met him. Hi, my name is Elder so-and-so. And he said to my friend, he said, what church do you go to? And without even thinking, he said, all of them. There's some people that think, as long as I'm sincere in my efforts, God's got to accept it. Sincerity is not enough. Israel had a zeal for God. It's not according to knowledge. Now, we have to worship God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And unfortunately, some people...
Ethiopian unity. He was religious, he was honest, he was powerful. And people think that's enough. If that's enough, why stump the cart?
If we were, exactly. If we were studying the minor prophets, the first one's Hosea. Anybody know what the first verse I would make you know for a test question? Anybody know that one off the top of your head? Hosea 4:6. Our visitor gets the gold star for the night. I can hear her back there quoting it. Say it louder, Sabrina.
My people were destroyed for lack of knowledge, or something like that.
No, that's exactly it. But the interesting thing is that's usually where we quit. Anybody know what the next phrase is? My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. We usually quit right there and make a powerful point with it, but I never quit right there. What's the next phrase? Because you have rejected knowledge, I will reject you from being priest for me. You ever had a job where no one was really defined who cleaned the bathrooms? And you get there for a while and you notice that, hey, I don't know whose job it is to clean the bathrooms, but what I do know is no one seems to be holding me accountable for it. Thanks, Katrina. She's cleaning it every week. Don't say anything. I want to rock the boat here. Oh, no, they're having a meeting where we're going to discuss who's cleaning the bathroom. I don't want to go. Why? Because I've already got it made. The only thing that meeting could do for me is teach me that I might actually have to do something. Some people do not want to know the truth. They don't want to be held accountable to it. They call themselves sincere, but they're rejecting knowledge because they'd have to make a decision. Might have to cut loose some people. Might have to cut loose of some old ideas, and they don't want to do it. Unfortunately, the pursuit of truth is not number one in some people's minds.
People are generally content where they are. Change require them to recognize or become discontent with it. And that's very difficult.
What's your motivation for where you go to service? It needs to be Jesus Christ and worshiping Him in spirit and truth, but sometimes our motivations are other things. We're comfortable. It's the church I grew up in. This is where all my friends are. What would I be saying about them if I left? Unfortunately, these are some of the hard truths, but Apostle Paul, did he make any friends with Jews when he showed up one day saying, oh, by the way, that crucify or persecute Christians things, my bad, I'm a Christian now. No, read 2 Corinthians chapter 11 sometime, start in verse 22 and see how much suffering he went through. He paid an enormous price for his faith. But anyways, Kohath does not get any of these contributions because they don't need them. They carry it by themselves, or the carts, I should say. The rest of the chapter actually goes through tribe by tribe who gave what. But it starts with the leaders. Notice in verse 2. Then the leaders of Israel, the heads of their fathers' houses, who were the leaders of the tribes, and over those who were numbered, made an offering. So he goes through each tribe. I'm not going to actually read them, but each tribe contributes one day. So they do a dedication service for 12 days. The one thing I would notice is, look at verse 12. And the one who offered his offering on the first day was Nahshon, the son of Amminadab of the tribe of Judah. And I'll make a point about that a little bit later, but just take note of that. Who was it? Nahshon, the son of Amminadab. But anyways, he goes through tribe by tribe the rest of the chapter and what they gave individually. And verse 84, he sums it up basically. This was the dedication offering for the altar from the leaders of Israel when it was anointed. And then he gives you a list, 12 silver platters, 12 silver bowls, 12 gold pans. Each silver platter weighed 130 shekels, each bowl 70 shekels. All the silver of the vessels weighed 2,400 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. 12 gold pans full of incense weighed 10 shekels apiece, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. All the gold pans weighed 120 shekels. All the ox for burnt offerings were 12 young bulls, the rams 12, the male lambs in their first year 12. Grain offerings, the kid of the goats as a sin offering 12. All the oxen for sacrifice for peace offerings were 24 bulls, the rams 60, male goats 60, the lambs in their first year 60. This was the dedication offering for the altar after it was anointed. So we are ready to go. Look at how the chapter ends. And when Now when Moses went into the tabernacle of meeting to speak with him, he heard the voice of one speaking to him from above the mercy seat that was on the ark of the testimony, from between the two cherubim. Thus he spoke to him. Not only is that inspiring, but why do you think it's right there? Any lesson to be learned from that? What do you know? Israel obeyed God to the T, did everything God said to do, and there's his presence. And I don't think it's an accident that it's right there. Chapter 8 is all about the Levites being consecrated to the Lord, gives them their purification ceremony. For instance, verse 6, take the Levites from among the children of Israel and cleanse them ceremonially. Thus you shall do to them to cleanse them. Sprinkle water of purification on them. Let them shave all their body and let them wash their clothes and so make themselves clean. And then he goes into the offerings, but I love that passage right there once again. Notice how the association between literally clean, literal cleansing in the Old Testament transfers to the New Testament. How are we cleansed? By the washing of water, or the washing of water by the word. So the same principle. Anyways, he gives those instructions, and then the rest of the chapter, they carry them out. I think I will ask this on the test. Look at verse 24. Actually, we should read 23. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "This is what pertains to the Levites. From 25 years old and above, when they enter to perform the service in the work of the tabernacle of meeting, and at the age of 50 years, they must cease performing this work and shall work no more. They may minister with their brethren in the tabernacle of meeting to attend to needs, but they themselves shall do no work. Thus you shall do to the Levites regarding their duties." So from 25 to 50 is the career of a working priest. Chapter 9, the second Passover is recorded. Second one we have recorded. There are 7 in scriptures. Not sure if I could recite them off the top of my head. I don't think I can. I can get most of them. But this is the second. Where's the first Passover recorded? Exodus chapter 12. Now, what's the chief difference between Passover and this Passover? Location. Where were they when the Passover was originated? Dwelling in their own homes. Hence, they had people in the house, depending on how many people were in the house. Put the blood over the doorpost, eat with your sandals on your feet, staff in your hand. What do you eat with the Passover lamb? And what else? Bitter herbs. 400 years of bitter slavery, unleavened bread, no leaven. Little leaven leavens the whole lump. And then you had the Feast of Unleavened Bread that comes right after that. So it's an 8-day celebration. This one, now they are camped around the tabernacle. Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month, this is chapter 9, first month of the second year after they come out of the land of Egypt, saying, "Let the children of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time. On the 14th day of the month, at twilight you shall keep it at its appointed time. According to its rites and ceremonies, you shall keep it." For some reason, in the book of Exodus, they took it on the 10th day and separated it for 4 days. And somehow that gets dropped here, but it actually starts on the 14th. So Moses told the children of Israel they should keep the Passover. They kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all the Lord had commanded Moses. So the children of Israel did. Now there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and Aaron that day. Those men said to him, "We became defiled by a dead body, the dead body of a man. Why are we kept from presenting the offering of the Lord at its appointed time among the children of Israel?" I love that verse. Why do I love that verse? I didn't get to worship God. I was robbed. I don't hear that attitude very much. On our bulletin, actually not the one that where I'm at, but a couple of churches I've had, privileged to serve. I like that phrase. You have to go to worship? Thank you. The man that converted me. That's what he said. How long do you have to come? You have to come till you want to come. Then you don't have to come anymore. That's about how easy it is. When you fall in love with something, it's not an obligation anymore. Got to get beyond the commandments. Some people spend their entire Christian life looking at everything that's being asked of them as though it's an obligation. Now, there are times we get overwhelmed. Some of us put too much on our plate. You can feel overwhelmed from time to time, but everything we're doing is a privilege. And we can't ever forget it's a privilege to do this. Did you have to pray for leftovers? I was prayed for yesterday. God bless you. It went bad overnight. I kept it in the fridge. I always like that because there's usually somebody out there, "I can't believe he's even," what do you mean? You have to pray for leftovers. Of course you don't. Yeah, you did ask for God to bless that food yesterday. But you get to talk to him again today. It's not an obligation to talk to the Lord. If we're going to eat it 3 days in a row, we'll bless it the next day as well. It is a privilege. Nothing we do is an obligation. Yeah, amen. It starts out as an ought. Man, I ought to do it. And I need to do it. But if your Christianity doesn't get you to the point where I want to do it, something's wrong. That's where it's got to get to. It's a privilege. But anyways, these people want to, which is why they installed what was called in Jewish history the little Sabbath, Passover. The first month, 14th day is the big Passover, and here's the little Passover. Verse 11. Well, actually, we'll read verse 8. And Moses said to them, stand still that I may hear what the Lord will command concerning you. In other words, he hadn't anticipated that. He's going to have to go to the Lord to figure out what to do about these people. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if any one of you or your posterity is unclean because of a dead body, or is far away on a journey, he may still keep the Lord's Passover. On the 14th day of the second month at twilight, they may keep it. They shall eat it with the unleavened bread and the bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it until morning, nor break one of its bones, according to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep. We'll stop right there for a minute. 14th month of the 14th day of the second month. That's 1 month later. David.
Margaret online, maybe you answered this and I wasn't listening. Asked, do modern day Jews still celebrate the Passover? I think they do.
Yeah, nothing like what's going on here. I couldn't tell you a modern. I'll see if I can get a better description. I know where to go, but I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
My first college roommate's family was Jewish, and during the Passover, they would take they had a whole set of separate dishes that had never touched anything leavened. They were only used for Passover. And that's the point. They did.
Sincerity. Why did David use a new cart? We talked about that when he was supposed to have the sons of Kohath transfer the Ark of the Covenant. He didn't do that. He put it on a new cart. Uzzah and Ahio drove it. Why was it? Does 1 Chronicles 13 specifically mention it was a new cart? Katrina just made me think of it.
Did you give the sign of the times?
No, because it's never been used for. Oh, actually, yeah. But I was just going to say it different. It's never been used for secular work. This is David's statement of how sincere he is. If that cart's had any use in the field, we can't use it. This has got to be a special made cart for this purpose. Same thing. This China's never touched leaven. We're giving the Lord our best. Sincere as they can be. But sincerity is not enough. Israel have a zeal for God, but it's not according to knowledge, unfortunately. So anyways, that's the second Passover. What distinguished the second Passover, or the little Passover, I should say? What distinguished it from the major Passover, if you will? There was no Feast of Unleavened Bread. That was a one-day event. Whereas the Feast of Unleavened Bread followed for 7 days after the first Passover. Yes, sir.
So like this also, or is far away on a journey.
Yeah.
Couldn't be on the journey and take the Passover.
No, because he would have to do it at the appointed place, and he's not there. Yeah, wherever God's tabernacle is set up is where the Passover is going to be. If you're away from home, you cannot possibly do that. So
I was thinking they were in their homes there.
Yeah, that would have been the first Passover. That's one of the things we do need to distinguish is, there's a progression to the Passover because the context changed. Exodus chapter 12, they're in Egypt. Here, they're in the wilderness. They're going to be in Jerusalem eventually. Nobody has to come up from a far place, and yet you still have people that are not ceremonially able. Well, you can imagine how much more difficult it would be once you're in Jerusalem. The tribes are spread out. People are traveling all over the place. There are, because of the context, it changes a little bit. And by the way, here's another one. Take this cup. What Passover in the Old Testament describes fruit of the vine with the Passover? And yet Jesus did it. Tradition introduced the cup. And yet we see Jesus honoring that tradition when he participated in the Passover. But it's not in Exodus chapter 12. There's no fruit of the vine. And yet the Jews had quite the ceremony as they passed out the cups. But they had some good traditions. As they would pass out the cup, the sun I forget whether it's the first or the second cup. I think they had 4 total, but the son would ask the father, what's this for? And what do you think the father responds? Let's go back to Egypt. Let's talk about Exodus chapter 12. Start quoting Exodus chapter 12. One generation teaching the next generation. This is why we do this. By the way, you ever notice in the book of Joshua, there are memorials all over the place. Memorial in the water, memorial on the other side of the water, memorials everywhere. You're supposed to remember your history. Jews were proud of their history, and they should be. Let's finish chapter 9. But anyways, I probably will ask you about the little Passover on the test. It is 1 month later on the same day. There is no feast of unleavened bread after the little Passover. But if you could not get up to the temple, or I should say the tabernacle, if you couldn't get up to the tabernacle, at least you got a second chance. Verse 15. And on the day that the tabernacle was raised up, the cloud covered the tabernacle. The testimony from evening until morning, it was above the tabernacle, like the appearance of fire. So it was always. The cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. Whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, after the children of Israel would journey, and in the place where the cloud would settle, there the children of Israel would pitch their tents. At the command of the Lord, the children of Israel would journey, and at the command of the Lord, they would camp. As long as the cloud stayed above the tabernacle, they remained encamped. Even when the cloud continued long, many days above the tabernacle, the children of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and did not journey. So it was, when the cloud was above the tabernacle a few days, according to the command of the Lord, they would remain encamped. According to the command of the Lord, they would journey. So it was, when the cloud remained only from evening until morning. When the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they would journey, whether by day or by night. When the cloud was taken up, they would journey. Whether it was 2 days, a month, or a year, that the cloud remained above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would remain encamped and not journey. But when it was taken up, they would journey. At the command of the Lord, they remained encamped, and at the command of the Lord, they journeyed. They kept the charge of the Lord at the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. Psalm 68, I got written down next to that. David writes a psalm that uses some of this language, and is probably talking about the pillar of cloud by night and fire, by fire at night, and the pillar of cloud by day that led Israel. What an incredible way to be led. Where was Israel headed? I don't know. God's directing us. When you're a kid, do your parents necessarily have to tell you where we're going? C.S. Lewis tells a great story about a kid who's in his backyard making mud pies. And his dad throws up the screen door and says, "Get in here, son, get cleaned up. We're taking you to the beach." And the kid's upset. Why do you think the kid's upset? Because he's never been to the beach. He knows he's having fun making mud pies in the backyard, but he doesn't know what it means when his dad says he's taking him to the beach. All he knows is he's having a good time. He has no idea what his dad has just offered him. And that's, I think, unfortunately, the state of human beings. We spend our life trying to fill ourselves up and make ourselves feel full, when the only thing human beings were designed to run on is the Spirit of God. Everything else will leave you empty and hollow. We can't even imagine what God has waiting for us. The point I'm trying to make is, where was Israel headed? They don't know. But that pillar is above them. That's all you need to know. Everything will be all right. Unfortunately, where are they? They're in the wilderness. Everywhere they go, and seem fit for living for long term. Who's the only two that knew how to process this information? Joshua and Caleb. They were content to just let the Lord lead them. We'll get there when we get there. Isn't that pretty much how we're supposed to be? Where was Abraham headed? I don't know. Get out of your let me get that started. Now the Lord said to Abram, get out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, to a land I will show you. That's it. To a land I will show you. Follow me. I'll take you where I want you to go. And you will get there. Let's read the first 10 verses, and then we will take a break of chapter 10. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, make 2 silver trumpets for yourselves. You shall make them of hammered work. You shall use them for the calling of the assembly and for the directing of the movements of the camps. Now, Israel had a few different horns. Sometimes the actual literal ram's horn was what they used, but undoubtedly these are those big things that are wider at the bottom, based on the Hebrew word there and the translation, I believe, in the Septuagint as well. But anyways, anybody ever been to Meteor Crater in Arizona? I think I've talked about that before. If you ever get a chance, go see it. It's incredible. Big old meteor hit the earth 20,000 years ago, according to the video they make you watch. But I don't know when it happened, but it certainly hit the earth because there's a big old hole in there. And they've got those telescopes up at the top. And you look into the valley of that, and you don't realize how big it is. And the guard points out, said, look at that white spot there. And all you see is a white dot. You can't tell what it is. You look into it with a telescope, and it's a 6-foot-tall wooden astronaut saying hi. You wouldn't know that without that telescope. And the reason why I bring that up is because as they're describing how big this thing is, it says it could fit 20 football fields on the floor. And if it was a football stadium, 2.5 million people would be in attendance. And when I heard that, what do you think I thought? This right here. How are you going to get 2.5 million people on the same page? You better have something loud. You better have something everybody can hear. These ram's horns. You got to blow the ram's horns to get people's attention. And so here you go. When it's time to move, verse 3 will help us. When they blow both of them, all the assembly shall gather before you at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. But they blow only one, then the leaders of the heads of the division of Israel shall gather to you. When the sound of the advance, when you sound the advance, the camps that lie on the east side then begin their journey. When you sound the advances the second time, then the camps that lie on the south side shall begin their journey. And they shall sound and call for them to begin their journeys. And when the congregation is about to gather together, you shall blow, but not sound the advance. Sons of Aaron, the priest, shall blow the trumpets, and these shall be as an ordinance forever throughout your generations. When you go to war in your land against your enemy who oppresses you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, and you will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. Also in the day of your gladness and your appointed feasts at the beginning of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over your sacrifices, your peace offerings. And they shall be a memorial before you, before your God. I am the Lord your God. So, of course, by the way it was blown, that would tell Israel exactly what was up. What obvious reference or what obvious connection do we have here to the book of Revelation? 7 trumpets being blown. What's the significance? Wake up. God comes in partial judgment sometimes, tries to wake people up. Try to recognize how far removed from God they actually are. So he blows the trumpets. And if you'll notice, and when they're blowing the trumpets, there's an awful lot of apocalyptic language. Sun doesn't give its light, the stars fall from heaven, the moon turns to blood, that kind of stuff. It's God trying to warn man, to wake him up. Yeah, Katrina.
I find it interesting, the detail in describing what instruments are to be used and how. And I feel like that carries into the New Testament, like God's detailed with how he wants us to make music now. And if we were to use instruments, we would have instructions on what they were made of, what instrument it was, how it was to be played at certain times. That's all absent, and we're told to sing in the melody of our hearts. So we have we have the detail of what it is and the lack of detail for that. Like, I think that's so important and so significant.
Unfortunately, we live in a world that really struggles to understand what God's looking for. He's looking for pure hearts. He's looking for congregational singing. The instrument he made. I love it. I heard a gentleman say that one day. He said, God doesn't want to hear the instrument you made. He wants to hear the instrument he made. The melody coming from your hearts, the words meaning something. I don't think people truly understand what it means to be spiritual versus what it means to be sensual. Very nice if we can all sing and hold a tune and actually make that song work, but even if we can't, if it comes from a pure heart, it is a lovely sound to the Lord, and some people really struggle to understand that. Yeah, Dave?
Well, making the same point that no matter which congregation you're at, or our congregation, not everyone there is singing out because they're concerned about how they sound. Not everyone is of pure heart. God knows. So it's really about what, because we have a pure heart and a love and desire for God, we'll be glad to sing out because it's not about how it sounds.
I had to take a class up. I actually did it Zoom online for the students, but did a funeral for a woman I met in Palm Harbor, Florida. She sat right behind me, just a beautiful Christian woman. She was like 93 when she died. When I met her, I think she was like 83. Sat right behind Nicole and me. That's where I met Nicole, but she sat right behind us every Sunday morning for us to stand up to preach. 9 years of listening to her, she never hit a note right in her life. She didn't. And it was precious, if you knew it. I just loved turning around looking, and she had her face looked like a child's face. And by the way, young people, this is how I met her. Getting into the building. Next thing you know, there's a truck pulling up, and they're wheeling her in. It's a big smile on her face. Oh, we're going to sing? Okay, well, watch me hack this up. It was beautiful. I don't understand how people miss that. Anybody ever heard Gregorian chants? They're haunting, man. They'll move you. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir, they don't miss too many notes. Is that what God's looking for? Spiritual. Get your senses lining up with your spirit. Unfortunately, some people work backwards and want their senses to encourage the spiritual. The spiritual ought to lead the senses. When I first became a Christian, I thought the pipe organ was the sound of religion. That's all I knew. And then I started studying. And now I realize congregational singing is the sound of God's music. Because that's what he's looking for. 7:15. Let's take a break. We'll be back at 7:35. Thank you. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Numbers chapter 10. Blowing of the trumpets. Obviously, you need to be able to communicate effectively to 2.5 million people. And the trumpets is how it would be done. The rest of the chapter is all about Israel's first departing from Mount Sinai. Now it came to pass on the 20th day of the second month in the second year, the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle of the testimony. Children of Israel set out from the wilderness of Sinai on their journey. Then the clouds settled down in the wilderness of Paran. Close by too is the Negev. It's territory that's south of the Promised Land, a little south of where Philistia also is located, a little bit south of that, but not conducive to basically desert country. 100, I think it was 150 miles in just about every direction. So it's pretty bleak looking. And you can imagine, what have we learned about this generation? Remember, what's the book of Numbers all about? It's really all about failure. Two of the most depressing books in the Old Testament, the book of Numbers. Anybody know what's even worse than that one? Judges. 400 years of misery. You read the book of Judges, it's pretty depressing how far removed from the law of Moses and how quickly they got there. But the first generation, they failed every way they could possibly fail. And here's part of how it starts. You can imagine they're leaving the foot of Mount Sinai with high hopes. And yet, where does God first put them down at? Pretty bleak, pretty desolate. And it requires your faith. It requires the testing of your faith. And unfortunately, the generation, as we already know, we're just reading the details of it, but the generation in the that came out of Egypt would not make it into the promised land. But anyways, they settled down in the wilderness of Paran, verse 13. So they started out for the first time according to the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. The standard of the camp of the children of Judah set out first. And again, tradition says that was the lion. We do not know all 12. I know some of you weren't here last week. Some of you, where were you on vacation at, Katrina?
We were in like the Buford, St. Helena, Fort Royal area.
Yeah, we went to a festival in Beaufort one time. That place, we want to go back. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we missed you last week. Missed you too. Nadia and Carl was there last week, but he's still online at least. But anyways, good to have you back. But we were talking about standards last week, and we do not know all the standards of the different tribes. Tradition has not recorded those, but standard of Judah, we're pretty sure, was the lion. Where does that come from? Look at Deuteronomy. Look at Genesis. Actually, I haven't looked myself in so long. Is it 49 or 50? 49. Genesis 49. Jacob on his deathbed is going to give some is going to do some prophesying about the future of his sons. Notice the prophecy that he makes in regards to his fourth son, Judah. Genesis 49, verse 8. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion. As a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people, binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. Does that bring up any images for you right there? When Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, what did he do? He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes are the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Now, I'm not sure of some of that imagery, but one thing's for sure. Judah is likened to a lion's whelp. Notice, too, your father's children shall bow down before you. And, of course, Christ comes from the line of Judah. And the scepter, what is the scepter? Symbol of authority. The staff that they would carry is called a scepter, but the king would have a scepter. Scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet till Shiloh comes. Now, we're not exactly sure what that means, but when the Jews in the book of Joshua come into the promised land, anybody know where they first set up the tabernacle? Shiloh. It gets destroyed. Jeremiah will point to the fact that it got destroyed, but I'm not even ready to discuss some of those details. But the only reason I really wanted to turn you to Genesis 49 is here's Jacob on his deathbed prophesying about the future of Judah. Of course, Jesus comes from Judah, likens him to a lion's whelp. So when you get to the book of Revelation, Jesus is called the lion from the tribe of Judah. That's where that imagery comes from. Jacob on his deathbed introduced that kind of imagery about Christ. And so it would be fitting that the standard for Judah would be the line. But anyways, again, we go through the details of each tribe, their standard as they set out, because now we are moving. The standard of the camp of the children of Israel, or children of Judah, verse 14, set out first according to their armies. Over their army was Nahshon, the son of Amminadab. Again, remember that name, Nahshon, the son of Amminadab. Now, I'm not going to read all of the tribes and the name of the elder of the land that's is named right here. But obviously, we're talking about a position of prominence here. Out of all the people in each tribe, these men have distinguished themselves and so are appropriately called leaders. And Judah here, Nahshon, the son of Amminadab, is the leader over that tribe. And so he lists the leaders over all the tribes for the rest of the chapter. Verse 21 says, the Kohathites set out carrying the holy things. The tabernacle would be prepared for their arrival. Now, some scholars aren't sure about how the furniture of the ark was actually carried. You know, we had 4 rings on each side of the Ark of the Covenant, as well as the burnt offerings, the altar of incense. And they would put poles in there. And guys, we think we're carrying them like that. Well, we're not exactly sure that's how they did it. Well, no, actually, I'm mixing stories. That's exactly how they did it. I was thinking of the other tribes and whether their carts were actually sitting on top of the oxen. But anyways, that's how the tribe of Kohath carried the tabernacle. Or the furniture of the tabernacle, I should say. One thing I did want to point out, look at verse 25. Then the standard of the camp of the children of Dan, which formed the rear guard of all the camps set out according to their armies. Over their army was Ahizer, the son of Ammishaddai. That's a mouthful right there. Notice it says Dan, which formed the rear guard. One of the reasons I point that out is Dan had a long history of being of its military prowess. Notice they are the rear guard. You don't just give that to anybody. So Dan, known for his militaristic spirit right from the get-go, here we see them bringing up the rear. Look at verse 29. Now Moses said to Hobab, the son of Reuel, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law. What else is he known by? That's Jethro. Moses' father-in-law is Jethro, also known as Reuel right here. He's a Midianite, priest from the tribe of Midian, or priest from the, not tribe of Midian, but the Midianites. Anybody remember where the Midianites came from? Trivia
One of the
question. How
daughters
many?
of Lot.
Go ahead, Carl.
One of the daughters of Lot's a child. One of the
you're
daughters of
close.
Lot.
You're close. That is Moab and Ben-Ami, the father of the Ammonites. Where did Midian come from? Genesis 25. After Sarah died, how many children did Abraham have by Keturah? It's 6. One of them was Midian. Why do I point that out? Because if you're Midian, who's your dad? Who's your daddy?
Abraham.
Father Abraham. Yeah. Why don't they know God the way we know God? When we get to Numbers chapter 22, what's Israel or Midian going to be doing with the Israelites? Going to be perverting their religion. How'd the Midianites end up so corrupt? They are actually a literal, Midian is a literal son of Abraham. How important is it for one generation to teach the next? All these nations that we're learning about started out knowing who God was. Midian is just another example. Moses' father-in-law was a priest from Midian. Obviously, they're not, or obviously he's much more righteous, but the Midianites are a piece of work. Verse 29. Moses said to Hobab, also known as Jethro, the son of Reuel, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, we are setting out for the place which the Lord said, I will give you. Come with us, we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised good things to Israel. And he said to him, I will not go, but I will depart to my own land and to my own kinsmen. So Moses said, please do not leave, inasmuch as you know how we are to camp in the wilderness. You can be our eyes. And if it shall be, if you go with us, indeed it shall be that whatever good the Lord will do to us, the same we will do to you. So they departed. Now you notice we aren't really told whether they go or not, whether Jethro goes with them or not. Most scholars think that he did go, and I tend to agree with them. But I think Moses talked his father-in-law into coming with him. Good story connected with this in the book of Jeremiah, but I'm not going to get to it tonight. So they departed from the mountains of the Lord on a journey 3 days, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them for the 3 days' journey to search out a resting place for them. Now stop and think about that for a minute. They're on the march for the first time. They've been marching for 3 days. They haven't arrived anywhere yet. They're in the wilderness and they don't know where exactly God is taking them. And they've been doing it for 3 days. Verse 34, and the cloud of the Lord was above them by day when they went out from the camp. So it was when the ark set out that Moses said, rise up, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered and let those who hate you flee before you. And when it rested, he said, return, O Lord, to the many thousands of Israel. So Israel does not actually know where they're going. We know what kind of generation this is, which is why here comes the failure. This is the section which defines the first generation. Why did the first generation die in the wilderness? Well, by the time we're done with the next few chapters, it ought to be obvious. Now, when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, for the Lord heard it, and his anger was aroused. So the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some in the outskirts of the camp. And I've got the phrase, and consumed some in the outskirts of the camp, highlighted. Anybody know why a preacher might highlight that? Took me about 3 seconds to read that verse and say, there's a sermon right there. Who gets picked off? Those who are on the outsides of the camp. Jump right in the middle. It's amazing how difficult that lesson is for some people. And by the way, don't look at me if you're looking for sympathy. You know why I came to the evening service the day I was baptized? Because somebody invited me to it after the morning service, and I thought about what I was going to do at 6 o'clock at night and realized I couldn't think of something better to do than worship the Lord, so why not go? You know why I came to the Wednesday night Bible class? Because somebody said they had a Wednesday night Bible class, and at Wednesday night I couldn't figure out, I can't think of a better thing to do than go to the Wednesday night Bible class. Elders have asked me to come. The idea that it's amazing how some people never connect that. The elders have asked you to come. Oh, okay. Got baptized on Sunday. Guess what the following Saturday was? By the way, how many people got a deacon begging forgiveness for them when they've been a Christian for 7 days? I do. You know why? Because the following Saturday we had a work day. I heard the announcements when I was at my first service. I went to the work day. Problem was, the only one at the work day besides the deacon was me, which is when the deacon went off about how little help they get here. He was reading the riot act right in front of me. Come the following day on Sunday when his cooler head had prevailed, the deacon's over there begging my forgiveness. And you just got baptized. I'm sorry. I beg you. Hey, it's okay. I understand. I mean, it doesn't take you long to figure these things out if you really want to. The work day at the church building, I wasn't doing it. I'm not working. I've got the time on. Lord comes first. These concepts are not hard to understand. Man, it converted me. If you'd come out of your service and said, I don't like that place, they're not friendly. You know what he would have said without skipping a beat? I'm saying G-shake. Who'd you walk up to and say hi? And that's the way he talked to me. I remember one time in the parking lot, him screaming, "Are you that stupid?" His wife said, "Calm down, Eddie, stop it. You're embarrassing." Well, guess what? It's okay with me. He was telling me what I needed to hear. And I mean, I didn't remember what it was he was calling me that for, but the point was, he thought it was pretty obvious what he was trying to get me to see, and that's the way he pointed it out to me. But anyways, I don't think some of these things are that difficult. Marlon, what's that? Mutual of Omaha?
Perkins.
Marlon Perkins, yeah. Out in the wilds in Africa, who's the lion pick up? Weak one, on the edge of the herd. I like what Jackie said one day. He said, some people got just enough religion to be absolutely miserable. Got 1 foot in the church, 1 foot in the world. Everything they hear hurts. Because they know they're not committed to the Lord. They're on the outskirts. And so every sermon is hurts, feel like the preacher's stepping on your toes. Sometimes what is pointed becomes negative because of the way we receive it. By the way, there's a big difference between two things, too, I think some people need to recognize. What's the difference between being judged and feeling judged? You know what feeling judged is, don't you? It's your own conscience trying to talk. Everybody that's looking at you ain't looking at you right. Everything that's said is the wrong tone, undertones. Take everything personal. Feeling judged and being judged are two different things. But anyways, I remember the first time I was a new Christian and somebody did something unchristian right there in the church building. It happened right in front of me. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You know what my first thought was? I'm getting out of here. This is the kind of behavior I was trying to escape church, escape. Called out ones, called out of this sinful world into the church. Well, I would bought all that when you said it to me. Now you're going to behave like that right in front of me? I'm out of here. You know what the second thought that came right behind that one was? This place needs me. Now I got 10 days of Christianity. This place needs me. I need a little more of that around here. Same week, people, I was at Alachua twice. Go to my first business elders meeting, I should say, elders and deacons meeting. We start discussing some of the weak Christians, how we might help them. I move away. 5 years later, I move away for 2 years and then move back. Go to my first elders and deacons meeting. We get to the part where we're discussing weak Christians and how we might help them. You know what I noticed? Those are the same people that were on the list 8 years ago. I had I had 15 minutes of Christianity. They told me to come to the evening service because the elders told would like you to. And that was really all it takes. I'm not sure we make very difficult things. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that sometimes you can't be at every service, and there are other things that sometimes creep up. But I'm a Cowboy fan, Dallas Cowboy fan. The NFC Championship game for the right to go to the Super Bowl started at 4 o'clock. 5:30, it's halftime. The game's up in the air. If I go to service and I come back, I'm going to miss the second half. I care, man. I want to see the Cowboys go to the Super Bowl. What do you think I did? Yeah, I went to worship. I enjoyed the fact the Cowboys did win and ended up winning the Super Bowl. But, the grand scheme of things, who cares? But anyways, I'm just kind of surprised sometimes that people don't respond to the church is supposed to be number one in your life. It's not that hard to figure out what we're trying to say to you. Wouldn't treat your boss that way. But anyways, you get the point. Israel's complaining because they're on the outskirts of the camp. God consumed some of them. Verse 2. And people cried out to Moses. When Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. So he called the name of the place Taberah, because of the fire that the Lord had burned among them, which literally means burning. And so, next complaint. Now the mixed multitude who were among them yielded to intense craving. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic, but now our whole being is dried up. There's nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. By the way, what does manna mean? What is it? Huh? Yeah. What is it? We don't know. And can't really figure it out from the descriptions either. But obviously they missed the meat. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, don't quote me on the verse. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. What's Solomon saying that? We hear it all the time. Those were the good old days. Really? Were they? It's the way we remember them. But not necessarily as good as we remember them to be. You know what I remember about childhood mostly? Being bored, wishing I was an adult. Throwing a tennis ball off a chimney wall until somebody called me to do something. I remember being bored a lot. I remember being broke too. Remember not being able to drive. I don't think it was as good as I remember. A lot about the past. Now I know sometimes when we look back, we look with nostalgia, but the former days might not have been as good as you think they are. And by the way, even if they were as great as you think they are, what's one of the problems when you're always lamenting the past, how much better they are than today? Saying much about the present. What's wrong with the present? That's how you have a glorious past, is by having a really cool present. And some people haven't figured that out. But unfortunately, these people are lamenting about the days when they were enslaved because they were eating meat. Verse 5, we remember the fish, which we just read that. Verse 8, people went about and gathered it, ground it on millstones, beat it in the mortar, cooked it in pans, made cakes of it, and its taste was like the taste of pastry prepared with oil. One of the scholars I'm reading for this class likened it to the potato manna, in the sense that, how do you prepare a potato? Any way you want to. 1.5 million things you can do with a potato. And apparently, manna served the same purpose. A whole bunch of ways you could prepare it. So even though it's manna every day, it still can be, you can still use some pizzazz on it. And when the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna fell on it. Now Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, everyone at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord was greatly aroused. Moses was also displeased. Moses said to the Lord, why have you afflicted your servant? Why have I not found favor in your sight? You have laid the burden of all these people on me. Did I conceive all these people? Did I beget them, that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom, as a guardian carries a nursing child to a land which you swore to their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give all these people? For they weep all over me, saying, give us meat that we may eat. I'm not able to bear all these people alone, because the burden is too heavy for me. If you treat me like this, please kill me here and now. I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness. That's kind of surprising to me, the way Moses is talking to the Lord, but obviously leading these people and the burdens that they are putting on him can weigh him down from time to time, and Moses gives vent to his complaint about the conditions he's in. And I notice that God actually responds and respects him, even though he's, to me, kind of on the edge there as far as the way I understand it. But by the same token, Moses really gives vent there to his displeasure. Here's the Lord's answer. So the Lord said to Moses, gather to me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people, officers over them. Bring them to the tabernacle of meeting, that they may stand there with you. Then I will come down and talk with you there. I will take of the Spirit that is upon you, and will put the same upon them. They shall bear the burden of the people with you, that you may not bear it yourself alone. Then you shall say to the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow you shall eat meat. You have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt, therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. Before we go any further, though, notice God responds to Moses' complaint. And once again, gives him helpers, people to elders of the land to help him bear the burden, because there is more work than anyone can do, and we always need help. Where did the office of deacon come from in the New Testament?
To make the reason we're going to take care of it. Keep playing the responses.
Grecian widows were being overlooked. Russ knows the story well. Acts chapter 6, I'm sorry. Acts chapter 6, Grecian widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution. Started complaining. The apostle said, that's a great work, but we can't leave the word of God or prayer to serve tables. And so the office of deacon is instituted because we have enough work. We just need more people. Has there ever been a congregation that hasn't complained? It's 10% of the people doing 90% of the work. First got out to California, and this first congregation I was ever at didn't have a monthly fellowship meal. I'm like, really? This is a larger congregation I was used to. You have a fellowship meal? Why not? The same people have to do everything. And we started doing things, and I noticed that some people, nothing gets done if you take away a certain group of people, and not much gets done. Problem gets more profound with a smaller congregation. You ever seen a child's puzzle? I've got a 10,000, I haven't put it together yet. I got a 10,000 piece puzzle. It's called Wheatfield. I was hoping somebody get that joke. That's not really funny. I was just seeing if you're paying attention. But you ever seen a child's puzzle? 12 pieces or whatever. How many of those pieces got to be missing before you have no idea what the picture is? 10,000 piece puzzle. You can have a lot of pieces missing. You can still see what's going on there. The smaller the congregation, you don't take too many important pieces out of that puzzle before nothing gets done anymore. Everybody's important. Even Moses needed some help. But anyways, verse 19. You shall eat not 1 day, not 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but for a whole month. It shall come out of your nostrils and become loathsome to you, because you have despised the Lord who is among you. I love some of the phrasing that God uses here to describe what it means to be this ungrateful. A lack of gratitude. And by the way, I'm a big fan in gratitude. When I was a younger man, I didn't think you could be happy and sad at the same time, and I realized how foolish that is. You have a lot of trouble in your life. Still be grateful, can't you? If a Christian doesn't recognize why he should be grateful at every moment of every day, no matter how many difficulties he may be having, he needs to look at it. There's always a reason to smile. There's plenty of things that can go wrong. By the way, I've been in some dark places as far as in the church. And so I know what I'm talking about. You can still be grateful. Things don't have to be going your way. And you can still be grateful. But anyways, they despise the Lord. Verse 21. Moses said, the people who I am among are 600,000 men on foot. Yet you have said, I will give them meat that they shall eat for a whole month. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them to provide enough for them? Shall the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to provide enough for them? And the Lord said to Moses, has the Lord's arm been shortened? Oh, I love that answer. Who else, or where else did God use the same phrase? One of our more famous passages, Isaiah 59. Lord's ear, how does he say that? The Lord's arm is not short, nor is his ear slack, that he cannot hear, but your sins have separated you from your God. Your sins and your iniquities have separated you from your God. I'm not quoting that very well, but the paraphrase gets the point. Verse 23, has the Lord's arm been shortened? Now you say, see whether my words will befall you or not. So Moses went out, told the people the words of the Lord, gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people, placed them around the tabernacle. Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took the spirit that was upon him, placed that same upon the 70 elders. And it happened when the spirit rested on them that they prophesied, although they never did so again. But 2 men had remained in the camp. The name of the one was Edad, the name of the other was Medad, and the Spirit rested upon them. Now they were among those listed, but had not gone out to the tabernacle yet. They prophesied in the camp. We really don't understand why they did not appear instead of the camp, but obviously God has approved of whatever their reason is, because he's still filling them with his Spirit. I can't imagine he would do that if he was disapproved of them. Verse 27, a young man ran, told Moses, and said, Edad, Medad are prophesying in the camp. So Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, one of his choice men, answered and said, Moses, my Lord, forbid them. And Moses said to him, are you zealous for my sake? Oh, that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. Moses returned to the camp, both he and the elders of Israel. Now a wind blew out from the Lord and brought quail from the sea, left them fluttering near the camp about a day's journey on this side, about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. And the people stayed up all that day, all that night, and all the next day, gathered the quail. He who gathered the least gathered 10 homers, spread them out for themselves all around the camp. Now, while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was roused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. So he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people who had yielded to craving. From Kibroth Hattaavah, people moved to Hazeroth and camped at Hazeroth. So obviously God provided for them. In his displeasure also, plague broke out among them. Don't know exactly how that plague took form. But once again, Israel is complaining against the Lord. People that just were removed from Egypt with a mighty hand, they saw the 10 plagues in Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, and yet here they are in the wilderness with this kind of an attitude. And it doesn't get any better, because here we go with Miriam, chapter 12. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, saying, because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. Don't really understand that, because she's a Midianite woman in Exodus. Scholars are all over the place on that one. I don't really have an answer. But anyways, I don't think it misses the point of what we are supposed to be learning from this story, though. Miriam and Aaron are speaking against Moses. Verse 2, and they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all the men who are on the face of the earth. Some people make a big deal about that verse, proving that Moses didn't write it. I suppose that verse challenges the authorship of Moses. Heard the story of a man who went to a meeting, and he was so recognized for his humility, they gave him a badge. Next week, he came back to the same meeting, he had the badge on, so they took it away from him. Why would Moses write that about himself? That's how the argument goes. Who would say that about himself? I'm the humblest man on the face of the earth. He almost sounds arrogant saying it. But I think they missed the point. The point is, yes, Moses is the author. Is it possible somebody else put this in? It's possible. But I don't have any problem with Moses saying that about himself, contextually speaking. Should Christians brag about their credentials?
You don't need to.
No, but I also noticed that the Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 3 states his credentials. Because there's a time and a place sometimes for things like that. Should Christians brag about how tough they are? And what I mean is, start telling war stories about how much I've sacrificed for the truth? No, but there's a time and a place for it. Paul, I referred to it already, 2 Corinthians chapter 11, starting in verse 22. Paul lists out details of many times he was beaten, shipwrecked, starving. Was he bragging about how much he's done for the kingdom? No. He's making a point. Sometimes there's a point to be made. And the point to be made is that Moses was a very humble man. And humble men don't steal authority, which is what his own family. You know, how bad has it got to be for Moses? Now his sister and his brother have turned on him. And particularly his sister Miriam has turned on him. Miriam seems to think that she's on the same footing with Moses. And again, knowing our audience, most of us know what comes next. Suddenly the Lord said to Moses, Aaron and Miriam, come out, you three, to the tabernacle of meeting. So the three came out, and the Lord came down in the pillar of cloud and stood by the door of the tabernacle. He called Aaron and Miriam, and they both went forward. And he said, hear now my words. Is there a prophet among you? I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision, and I speak to him in a dream. Now, that's not the only way that God speaks through prophets, but he is contrasting the usual way that God spoke through prophets in the way he spoke to Moses. This is one of those passages that emphasizes that Moses truly was, in some respects, the greatest hero of the Old Testament. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? What is, and he sees the form of the Lord? What's that a reference to? Exodus, I believe it's 34. Exodus 34, Moses in the cleft of the rock, the Lord passes in front of him, puts his hand in front of him, because no one could see the glory of the Lord live. But Moses got about as close as you can get, is the point. And that's what he means by that. And he sees the form of the Lord. Verse 9, so the anger of the Lord was roused against them, and he departed. And when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. Then Aaron turned towards Miriam, and there she was, a leper. And so Aaron said to Moses, oh, my Lord, please do not lay this sin on us, in which we have done foolishly, in which we have sinned. Notice Aaron includes himself. What has Aaron done up to this point? Only one I hear squawking is Miriam.
Well, verse 1 says Miriam and Aaron's.
Exactly, and what's my point? Two people walk in and one does all the talking, and you don't like what you're hearing, and the other one's standing over in the corner and doesn't say a word. He agrees with everything he's just been said. He's just as guilty. You don't feel the way that Miriam feels. Now's the time to speak up, Aaron. Aaron, by his silence, is endorsing exactly what Miriam is saying. But since Aaron is not struck with leprosy, you got to believe Miriam is more culpable in this sin. And obviously she becomes as leprous as white as snow. So Aaron said to Moses, oh, my Lord, please do not lay this sin on us, which we have done foolishly, and which we have sinned. Please do not let her be as one dead, whose flesh is half consumed. And it comes out of his mother's womb. So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, please heal her, O God, I pray. So once again, Moses' quality of character is on display here. Miriam challenges him and turns against him, complains about his authority, thinking she should have as much authority. She gets struck a leper, and yet there's Moses interceding on her behalf. And of course, God does heal her. Then the Lord said to Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, would she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut out of the camp 7 days, and after that, she may be received again. So Miriam was shut out of the camp 7 days, and the people did not journey until Miriam was brought in again. And afterward, the people moved from Hazeroth to the camp of the wilderness of Paran. Obviously, you get some dark stories about some pretty heroic people in the Old Testament. Moses isn't going to enter the promised land. We're not going to get there tonight, obviously. But here's Miriam's failing right here. Even though she's a mighty good woman, she failed. What's one of the comforting things about some of these sins of these great heroes of faith, particularly in the Old Testament, but you can include Paul and Peter as well?
Realize that
Yeah, kind of helpful to us too. Anybody else come into the church feeling like I'm not worthy? Well, that's how I came in. Kind of comforting learning that some of God's greatest heroes, they had some dark moments, but they got back up. But anyways, Miriam was struck with leprosy. Moses interceded on her behalf, and after 7 days, she was brought back in. Anybody remember the king in Israel, Judah's history, that got struck with leprosy because he tried to officiate at the altar of incense when he wasn't a Levite? Levites challenged him, and he got struck with leprosy, ended up dwelling in his own house, and his son had to reign in his stead because he was a leper the rest of his days. King Uzziah reigned 52 years. He was really a good king, but that was his great sin. Is for some reason, he tried to offer incense on the altar, but he struck with leprosy. My point being, notice how in both those stories, they were sinning and they were struck with leprosy. Is leprosy in and of itself, is that a sign that you're a sinner? But you can see how people would think that way when you get stories like this where leprosy is actually the punishment for your sin. But anyways, it's the same theory. That idea has been around with us for a long time. Yeah, see if it's...
He did something because he had some choice words for the priest. The priest was telling him who was in the organization, and he was telling the priest he was king.
Yeah.
And as he was doing that, that's when he was king.
Yeah, the story's pretty similar. You get right down to it. He was usurping authority he didn't have. Marion was trying to get authority she didn't have as well. So, yeah, the punishment is the same in both cases. I hadn't made that connection yet. What was I going to say, though? John chapter 9, the man that's born blind. What's the first question that's asked of Jesus about it?
Who sinned? This man or
See how people automatically associated being born blind or having leprosy with, well, what sin did you commit? What book in the Old Testament's debating that question? It's the book of Job. Yeah, thank you, Carl. I keep forgetting there's people listening online. It scares me. Made my spine jump a little bit. But yeah, Job. Job's three friends. You had to do something, Job. Confess it. Maybe God will shine his countenance upon you again. And what's Job's response? He says a lot of things, but one of them is, I'm innocent. He starts questioning God because he knows he hasn't done anything. But anyways, that idea has been around for a long time. But stories like this kind of help people to look at it that way. But we need to recognize that that obviously that does not mean that you're a sinner because you're born with some defect like that. All right, chapter 13. I kind of wanted to do 13 and 14 together, but I guess that's not going to happen. But definitely want to do 13. Here's your ground zero to the book of Numbers, chapters 13 and 14. Why is Israel not able to go into the promised land? Because of this story right here. Look at chapter 13. Lord spoke to Moses. I've got verse 2 highlighted. Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. Each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, everyone a leader among them. What phrase do you think jumps out at me in verse 2?
I am given.
I am giving them. Case closed. All you got to do is go in and spy out the land. It's yours. Why would anyone come back and say, we can't take it, when God has already told you he's given it to you? So Moses sent from the wilderness of Paran according to the command of the Lord. all of them men who were heads of the children of Israel. Now these were the names from the tribe of Reuben, Shemua. Verse 5, Simeon sent Shaphat, or Shaphat, I guess I should say. Verse 6, Judah sent Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. Verse 7, Issachar sent Igal, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Verse 8, Ephraim sent Hoshea, which of course is Joshua, the son of Nun. Verse 9, Benjamin sent Palti, the son of Raphu. Verse 10, Zebulun sent Gadil. Verse 11, from Manasseh, Gadi, the son of Sushi. Now I'm hungry. From the tribe of Dan, Amiel. From the tribe of Asher, Sether. From the tribe of Naphtali, Nabdi. And from the tribe of Gad, Gul. These are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. Okay. Reason I read that list of names, that's a test question. Were the 10 spies who came back with a negative report? Actually, nah, I'm changing my mind. I'm not going to ask that for a test question. You know why I read those names? Who remembers those names? You know, I think one of the things sometimes I wish people would realize, you want to write yourself out of God's story? You can't. Nobody remembers those names. Joshua and Caleb. Not only do we remember those names, but we name our children after them. Nobody remembers the 10 spies. Anybody remember Demas in the New Testament? What's the last thing ever said about Demas?
He forsook Paul.
Keep going.
And
What was the reason?
Went back into the world.
The love of this present world. If you love the world more than you love God, go after it, but don't be surprised if heaven doesn't remember you. Want to be anonymous in heaven? You can be. But who would want to be? And unfortunately, sometimes people don't look at it that way. Nobody's going to name their kids after these guys. And by the way, they're going to be dead here shortly. But anyways, those are, out of courtesy, I went ahead and read their names. Those are the 10 guys that history has forgotten. And as Jackie once said when we were reading this chapter, man discourages while God encourages. So Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, said to them, go up this way into the south and go up to the mountains and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many. Whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds. Whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are forests there or not, be of good courage. Bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time of the season was the first ripe grapes, which means it's probably July-ish. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rohab near the entrance of Hamath. And they went through the south and came to Hebron. Ahiman, Shishai, Talmai, the descendants of Anak were there. Now who's Anak, by the way? He sells peas, doesn't he? Jolly Green Giant. Yeah, I didn't tell that joke well. I gotta have to work on that one. Anak, he's a giant. Plenty of giant, by the way, when we get to Deuteronomy. There's giants in the land all over the place. One of the things I like about Anak, though, notice Hebron. Here's a test question for you, and the answer is not in the Pentateuch. It's actually in Joshua. Anybody know what territory Caleb got? Kirjath Arba, which becomes Hebron. They changed the name. You know what Kirjath Arba stands for? Arba was the chief giant of the Anak. Who's the only 2 spies that said we could take the land? Joshua and Caleb. Where's Joshua going to end up, or Caleb going to end up dwelling? In the town of the chief giant. Maybe you should believe God when he says he's giving you the land. But unfortunately, the giants scared the daylights out of the 10 spies. Verse 23, then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there they cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes. They carried it between two of them on a pole. What was that, like 40 pounds or something? A cluster of grapes. Somebody weighed one time. I mean, these were prime grapes as far as how big they were. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the men of Israel cut down. And they returned from spying out the land after 40 days. So they departed and came back, Moses and Aaron, all the congregation of the children of Israel, in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation, showed them the fruit of the land. Then they told them and said, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. And I've got nevertheless highlighted. Unfortunately, sometimes unfaithful people, they see the dark cloud. They don't see the opportunity. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land in the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the banks of the Jordan. Hittites bothered people forever. I think it was like 1906 before archaeology uncovered any remnant of proof that the Hittites actually existed. For years and years and years, scholars said there was no such thing as Hittites because they couldn't find any example. Yet another example of wait on the Lord, he'll be proven right. But the Hittites definitely had a long, rich history, and archaeology has started to figure that out. Verse 30, I got highlighted. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once to take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men who had gone up with them said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. He gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people who we see in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, the descendants of Anak, came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight. So we were in their sight. It's 8:30, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. But obviously the giants were particularly scary to them. Weren't scary to Joshua, weren't scary to Caleb. Goliath wasn't scary to David. Goliath, of course, from the Philistines, where the descendants tended to trickle off to after they were destroyed. Anybody know how tall Goliath was? He was over 9 feet tall. The spearhead on his spear. Anybody ever go bowling? 16-pound ball is the biggest ball you can have. Next time you go bowling, take a broomstick and put it in a 16-pound ball and do that. If you can hold it up, you're Goliath. David wasn't scared of it. David's an amazing character. How courageous was David? Wasn't scared of Goliath, wasn't scared of the lion, wasn't scared of the bear. You know what he was scared of, though? And he was scared of Israel finding out who he really was. Amazing how many people have courage in the physical world but don't have any courage about who are you really? Now, David's redeeming quality, when Nathan finally confronted him in his sin that he'd been hiding for months, David said, I have sinned. Didn't blame it on anyone else. He just took ownership for it. But still, moral courage sometimes is much more important than physical courage. All kinds of people have physical courage and don't have moral courage. But anyways, we'll pick it up chapter 14 next week. Thank you for coming out. Give me those tests in if you're online. We appreciate you listening in as well. Russ, since you're back, would you lead us in a word of dismissal prayer, please?